An unravelling. The young come into focus as time seeps this body. Welcome to the Mad About podcast. This is the show where we will be discussing mental health, neurodiversity, and creativity. Every show, we will be starting off with a piece of creative writing at the beginning by one of our listeners. And the haiku that you heard today is by Sam. Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing your haiku. I actually added one more syllable, so it's not strictly a haiku anymore, but it's still great. And we're your hosts. I'm Sadie P.
And I'm Catty G. We both have lived experience of mental health issues and or neurodiverse conditions and are massive fans of art, music, theatre and all things creative, as well as nurturing our own creative practices.
We will be interviewing outside artists mostly on the show, talking about mental health and creativity and looking a little bit deeper at where these things intersect.
Every week we'll be taking on a different topic. This week, we're...
Dance! This week we're mad about dance. We hope you enjoyed the very first episode of the Mad About podcast. How are you feeling about it, Catty?
Yeah, good. It was quite a scary experience to put it out to the world. It's not often that we sort of talk to an infinite amount of strangers on the internet about quite personal things, really. So it's been quite an interesting personal journey in terms of that being new territory for me, I guess. How about you?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange one, really, isn't it? It feels good that we managed to get it together and to a certain standard that I was happy with. Yeah, I feel really proud of myself that I did the interview and managed to be authentic and myself. But yeah, I am struggling with quite a hangover today. Yeah, a vulnerability hangover.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, we're being seen, Catty.
Yeah, we're being seen and it's terrifying.
Terrifying, but also exciting.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful for everyone that's listening. And
I hope people enjoy hearing us bang on about ourselves.
One of the strangest, but also most intriguing and redemptive things that humans get up to, in almost any culture one cares to study, is occasionally to gather in large groups, bathe in the rhythmic sounds of drums and flutes, and move their arms and legs about in complicated and frenzied ways, losing themselves in the bewilderment of a dance.
The piece of writing you just heard was by Alain de Botton. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Alain de Botton.
There was an amazing video that I saw going around on Facebook, and it's on YouTube, called The Importance of Dancing Like an Idiot, and it's so amazing. Mm-hmm. He talks about how dancing is such an innate thing that humans do, and how important it is to us, and how universal it is across all cultures, but also the fact that so many people really struggle and get really blocked with it. I love that video, and we're going to put links to it on our Facebook page for anyone who hasn't seen it already. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I really miss dancing. I really miss...
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, I think in some ways I'm probably dancing more now during lockdown than I was before lockdown, just because I'm dancing every Friday, and before I wasn't.
Yeah, we've got a dance nights on Fridays. Sometimes I get a bit blocked on those as well, actually, because it's different on Zoom.
You can't hide behind the crowd of moving bodies.
No, there's no crowd to hide behind, and people are looking at all of you on the screen. Yeah. And also you can see yourself.
Especially when somebody pins you. Well, like if, people do that as to keep the sort of momentum of a Zoom party going, that they'll pin different people to be full screen. And suddenly it's like, spotlight on you and you've got to think of all these cool moves. And I'm like, I'll just go and get a drink from the corner of the screen somewhere. Yeah, not cool.
I love dancing, but sometimes it is hard to get into it. Definitely, there are a lot of blocks around it.
Absolutely.
Before lockdown came in last year, I had a birthday night out, and it was a really, really good night out. And I felt like I was really glad that I got that in, because it was just so good for the soul.
Yeah, I didn't. I missed it. My birthday was just as lockdown started. It was that week. And I just missed getting any kind of, everyone was already a little bit paranoid about getting together, I think, by that point.
So in this episode, we want to talk about dance and the importance of dance to our well-being. I guess it's all kind of about expression, and I don't know, it's kind of like, it's like getting out of your mind, and dancing is like a letting go and kind of not doing or behaving or sitting in a way that's polite or trying to sort of do what you should be doing for work or whatever. It feels like a release and a letting go, and it feels quite similar to other art forms as well, kind of getting through those blocks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, arguably what's on the other side of dancing with a group of people, or even on your own, is like getting to this state where you transcend just being a silly human in a human body, and you sort of unite with everybody else, and you have this like maybe sort of ecstatic or transcendent moment. And arguably throughout all of history, humans have had, you know, rituals and ceremonies where we do that, and we gather in groups and we sort of get out what we need to get out as a group or individually. And in the West, we've completely lost any of those kinds of rituals, and it's actually sort of looked down upon to go and dance like a crazy person.
It is, isn't it?
It's like a sign you've lost your mind.
It kind of feels like the only people who really dance like crazy people are ravers, or maybe Five Rhythms dancing, ecstatic dance nights.
Exactly.
But is there anything in between, or weddings?
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially in Britain, we've really only got like toxic places to go and do that, generally speaking, haven't we? It's all involved in mind-altering substances.
It kind of feels like, to dance, it has to be done in a club or at a gig, and there has to be alcohol and lots of people, and it's loud.
Then you start to run into things around like clubs and places where people go to dance feeling a bit exclusive, and you have to be dressed a certain way or be below a certain age, or your body has to be shaped a certain way in order to go in there and dance and not feel ashamed of yourself, you know?
Definitely. It's so linked in with body image, body consciousness. Definitely. I remember from a really young age becoming aware of my body shape being kind of like bigger than was acceptable for a girl. I used to do ballet, and I can remember, like, I used to really enjoy it, but I can remember becoming aware from kind of, quite a young age that I wasn't the right kind of person that should be doing that, because I was bigger than a lot of the other girls. Yeah.
I had a really similar experience. And I remember getting kicked out when I got to be too big for ballet classes, and I was never small enough and graceful enough, and you know, it was a very judgment-oriented area, isn't it? Like,
I'm going to say this right now, and I'm going to say this on behalf of everybody who's ever felt judged by a ballet teacher. Ballet can do one.
To hell with ballet. And ballet is also the opposite of what we're trying to get at in like raving or dancing to drums or any kind of rhythm, because ballet is so controlled. It's like the opposite of how a human body is supposed to move. And if you look at like how a gorilla moves versus how a person who's doing ballet moves, they're almost as opposite as you can get. So it's like humans trying to be like, look how evolved we are, look how much we can control our bodies.
I mean, I've never been to see like a massive ballet production or anything like that, but I'm sure it's amazing. But in my experiences, of learning it. It is rigid, it's controlled, it's tight, it's like particular movements, but it's definitely not dancing like an idiot. And I don't think that's where the mood boosting benefits come from.
No, I don't think I mean, maybe you could get mood boosting benefits from a ballet class, but not the sort of serious kinds of ones you're subjected to as a little girl when everyone's telling you that you're the wrong shape and size and doing it wrong.
I guess the kind of dancing that I like is the kind of crazy dancing with my friends where we're all kind of doing
silly moves together. And I really like stomping. I'm really into like stomping a lot. It's like a really fun sort of primal feeling. Although I don't know, my sister appreciates it very much downstairs.
I really like the reggaeton. Me gusta la gasolina. I like some sexy dancing.
I do too.
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That's what will get me moving more than anything else. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was saying that like if he's having a bit of a sort of stuck moment, he'll just put his headphones on and then pump really loud reggaeton into his head. And it almost makes him feel like he's at a club and getting drunk, just the sort of connection between the music and moving his body. It sort of can trick his brain into feeling like, yay, I'm out and having fun kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something about moving your body. Like if you're just stuck or feeling in a certain way or feeling on a loop, just changing the way that you're changing the position of your body, definitely dancing helps to kind of create that movement, and which is the opposite of stuckness.
Yeah, exactly. It can help create flow.
But yeah, that's an article that I saw about how dancing is being prescribed now, social prescribing it's being prescribed to people who are lonely and depressed.
This is a step in the right direction, isn't it? I can't remember who said the quote now. That's really annoying, but there was a quote yesterday saying that if dancing could be made into a pill, it would be the single most prescribed and effective pill ever, because it can literally solve so many of our health problems, like mental health, things like Parkinson's disease, things like depression. Like, you know, if you dance, it is an all-round improver of our life. And it's interesting that we're so blocked to do this thing that could be potentially so beneficial for our health.
There was an actual statistic about that in one of these articles about, was it if you dance for 15 minutes a day, it increases your life expectancy by 14%.
Yeah, I think it goes for any form of physical exercise for 15 minutes a day, but dance is surely one of the more fun forms of exercise. Well, maybe not for everybody, but... We spend a good deal of our time fearing, as if it were a momentous calamity that we did not even dare contemplate in daylight, that we might be idiots and holding back from a host of important aspirations and ambitions as a result.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the blocks that people have about dancing.
Yeah.
There was the article about it being most common in men.
Strictly not dancing, why some men won't dance.
Yeah, I wonder if that's something to do with the whole toxic masculinity of men feeling like they have to be a certain way, and maybe there's more pressure on men to not be an idiot and not look silly, to look kind of in control and manly, and dancing isn't seen as manly, perhaps.
Yeah, well, culturally, it's a woman or a homosexual man's activity. Like, that's the whole plot of Billy Elliot. yeah, it's just Billy Elliot wanting to be a dancer and his sort of tough northern dad being like, that makes you a
If I'm absolutely honest with you, I would not go out with a man who did not dance. I wouldn't trust him.
No, I would find it really difficult, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, what would you do for fun?
They also they've been doing some some scientific research around hormonal levels in men and women and how that impacts the way we dance. And if you go into a nightclub and you measure the men with very high levels of testosterone, they'll be the ones that are way more sort of gyratory in their hips and exuberant moves, and a bit like a mating dance.
I wonder, this takes me back to my animal behaviour days. I studied animal behaviour at uni.
Apparently women do it too, that when they're like on the fertile days of their cycle, they will use their hips a lot more. And when they're not on fertile days, they'll use their arms a lot more.
Interesting. Oh my God.
I love that scientists were like, we must study this. What is happening?
That must have been a really fun job, Yes.
Yeah, but I do think that it must be harder for men in general, especially. I don't know how much it's related to Englishness, particularly, because if you do travel around, you do notice that in other countries they do dance a lot more readily than. I don't want to say British people, because Scottish and Irish and Welsh people all dance a lot more, I think, as well, than the English
Definitely.
people.
Why is it an English thing? And I mean, binge drinking is a very English thing, and maybe it's to do with the, it's the stereotype of English people not showing their emotions and being very stiff upper-lipped, and perhaps that's the reason why we need to have a load of alcohol to be able to dance. But ironically, when I did used to drink, I actually used to be a worse dancer.
Well, it's not great for your coordination, is it? I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Ironically, I guess I was drinking because I cared what people thought more. So I had to drink to not care about what people think so I could dance. But then I would end up kind of stumbling and trying to sort of like make it look like I meant to do that when I'd kind of half fallen over.
You've just revealed that the way that we are makes no sense.
I know, I've just solved it. I've just solved the entire problem of the UK. I'm here next week.
So guys, drink less and you'll feel less self-conscious because you'll be a better dancer.
The great conundrum of our times.
Well, I mean, it is interesting, like I went on a little thing of why it is that British people got so repressed. And it's sort of lots of it goes back to the French Revolution, where we were closely watching from the other side of the channel France sort of collectively lose their minds and descend into insanity, and the monarchy got taken apart. And over in England, we said, look, this is what happens if you lose control. We need to protect the monarchy. We need to be very sort of controlled by logic and reason and not by our sort of tempestuous emotions.
Oh my God.
And then colonialism happened, and that was all obviously all these English people going to Africa and seeing people dancing to drums, and that's when this sort of stiff upper lip thing started to really emerge, because we needed to justify that our way was better in order to justify us colonizing those places in a way.
Oh my God.
So it was a way of not showing your feelings to rule the world on a basis of your superior self-control.
That's really interesting. So if we have self-control and we don't dance and we're ruled by our rational mind, then we're pretty good at taking it over other countries, but perhaps not so good at connecting with people and enjoying our life.
Yeah, exactly. It goes really deep. It's really interesting sort of social area, especially as an English person, because we're really used to it because it's all around us.
The ancient Greeks were for the most part committed worshippers of the rational mind. Their foremost god, Apollo, was the embodiment of cool reason and disciplined wisdom. However, the Greeks understood that a life devoted only to the serenity of the mind could be at grave risk of desiccation and loneliness. And so they balanced their concern with Apollo with regular festivals in honour of a quite different god, Dionysus, a god that drank wine, stayed up late, loved music and danced.
So yeah,
they knew something that we've forgotten, and that if we're going to spend all of this time in our rational mind, we also need to balance that out with time not being in our rational mind.
So perhaps somewhere along the line, British people kind of went a little bit too far one way, and lost.
We definitely don't have the balance anymore.
Balance, yeah, definitely. When I think about people who like staying up late, loving loud music and dancing, I think of like the ravers. Yeah, so it does kind of feel like it's kind of what you were saying earlier about the importance of kind of this ecstatic dance and letting go and gathering with other people and dancing, and how inherently human that is, but how also that's very demonized, and young people doing it is seen as a threat.
Absolutely.
I know it's not a lockdown episode, but lockdown has really had a big effect on people's ability to gather together and dance.
Yeah, and on the clubbing industry, which was already, I think, something like 50% of nightclubs in Britain have shut in the 10 years before COVID. So there's very little left of the industry now, and what little is left is getting absolutely hammered.
I was reading about how a lot of DJs think that the events are just going to be illegal. It's gonna go back to more of a warehouse and raves in forest kind of time. I wonder if there will be another kind of like a 1990s kind of like awakening that's happening now, like post COVID, or maybe even now with there has been illegal raves going on, like
around Bristol there were quite a few.
I heard quite a few. You can kind of hear it on the wind.
Did you? Hear the bass on the breeze.
It makes me feel a little bit old.
The longing to think maybe could I walk over there and just
I really passed it. I don't even know where they're going, where they're happening. But I was wondering about kind of this new generation of young people who are kind of taking to the forests to get their dancing fix, and whether or not there's kind of like a generation C that's going to be emerging of like these feral forest ravers that are now kind of emerging. You can find them at the weekends, just like emerging from the trees.
I kind of want to be one of them if it didn't mean, flouting lockdown regulations.
Me too, but I'm also a bit old.
Well, no, but I also think, like, to hell with that. I think hopefully something that might come out of this, if people do realise that, when we're denied the chance to meet together and dance together, that maybe it's worth creating slightly more inclusive spaces when we can meet and dance together.
Yeah, what was the Zoom parties that you were talking about?
Oh, yeah.
The queer house party?
Yeah, that was that queer house party. Yeah, that was a group of housemates who launched a weekly online party during lockdown. And it was basically a sort of inclusive online party with sign language interpreters and audio description for those with disabilities. And for disabled clubbers who struggled sometimes at venues before COVID, it was apparently an absolute revelation to have a nightlife that was suddenly accessible to them.
Yeah, wow. So COVID has really kind of turned clubbing on its head, really, and actually made things more inclusive of people who weren't included at all before. People in wheelchairs.
I saw a post. Somebody posted it was from an introvert social media page, and it posted a photo of one of the socially distanced gigs. Have you seen where there's these sort of islands of tables, all quite far apart from each other? And their comment was, "Yes, finally, I'll be able to go to gigs," because obviously, as they used to be for somebody who's socially introverted, that wasn't like an accessible way for them to go out and enjoy themselves at all.
Wow. Yeah, I've been out a couple of times, not many times since COVID hit, obviously not since the last lockdown hit, but when everybody could start going out again in a different way back in the summer. I can't remember when it was. We went to like this sit down DJ night, and it was so weird. It was illegal to get up and dance. It's like if you got up and danced, you were breaking the law. You had to sit in your seat and sort of just wiggle around. And
didn't you just stand up just a tiny bit?
Yeah, a few people did, but then it was like, oh, this is so naughty. It was so odd. The only time you could stand up is if you were going to the toilet, and it kind of felt like being at school, with all of these rules, and felt really rigid and quite odd.
Yeah, it's strange. And they're saying that could potentially only get worse with, there being more bouncers as we go out, and even things like temperature checks on the door as you go in. And
I saw this event where they'd marked out kind of single 2 meter distance, single dancing spots outdoors. Maybe that could be the future of clubbing, or the future of dancing, kind of staying in your little area.
But then there's all of quite a lot of the benefit that apparently comes from dance is to do with it, sort of the social aspect of it, and also the contact and touch that you get from learning certain kinds of sort of partner dance or contact improvisation and things like that. And so those will be those are definitely lost at the moment, and I hope that they're not lost in the more long term.
And also dancing in clubs and batting off random strangers who are kind of grinding up against you. Don't forget that.
Such a shame that
I don't
will
miss
be
that. I don't miss that.
Maybe we can take that as a huge win.
I found that really annoying, actually. I mean, I don't go to places like that anymore, but at times when I have gone out and I've wanted to dance with my friends, it kind of felt a little bit like, in a way, like with unwanted attention from men. I guess maybe I'd internalized it as, I was dancing, I deserved to be groped by that person.
Yeah, completely internalized.
There's a lot of places where I wouldn't really want to go, and I'm probably a little bit old anyway, and perhaps that works in my favour for potentially not being groped by strangers.
No, I think you'd probably still go. No, I don't want to say you'd
thanks.
Probably
I don't know if to take that as a compliment or not. I don't know. I feel weird about that.
You have.
Yeah, that's a bit odd, isn't it? Oh, if I'm being groped, I've still got it. Oh, great. But if I'm not being groped, what's wrong with me?
That's a sign that you're still a valid woman.
Yeah, it's really odd, isn't it? How we internalise this.
What a society we live in.
Should we talk a little bit more about men dancing? And I wanted to mention this statistic. I'm loving the statistics today.
Yeah, let's get them facts.
Yeah, so 750 out of 1,000 men don't dance, according to a YouGov survey.
So they have never or rarely danced. That statistic's just sinking in.
But there is also another statistic that says that 75% of men are more likely to dance at a wedding, which reminds me of the Peter Kay sketch. He kind of acted out this whole wedding, and how people who don't normally dance just go for it.
Yeah, they just go for it. Well, that also points to what we were talking about earlier about how, we don't have those rituals anymore, and a wedding is just a ceremony and a ritual.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's one where men feel that, basically the only one where men feel that they can dance. So maybe we could have some more.
Yeah, a permission slip.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's kind of certain permission slips for people, like certain places, like if you're in a club or a gig and there are other people dancing, it's okay. If you've had some booze, it's okay. If it's a wedding, it's okay. If you're in your house on your own, it's not okay, because that means you must be actually crazy.
Yeah, then you've lost it.
Yeah, that's too far. But actually, like that's what a lot of us are doing now. We're dancing around in our houses by ourselves.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if people in general, or in England in general, if people are dancing more in lockdown than they were before or not.
I wonder, yeah. On a different note, I feel like we couldn't do an episode about dancing and mentioning about men dancing without talking about Bill Bailey on Strictly Come Dancing. Did you see that?
Oh my gosh! He's been absolutely making my life throughout this lockdown. I love him anyway, but now I love him even more.
He's a dude. Yeah, I didn't watch it, but I saw somebody posted a video on Facebook, and he was wearing these amazing trousers, and he had the moves.
Who would have thought he would be so nimble? I'm absolutely shook.
Yes. He's
like Michael Flatley mixed with Gandalf.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode about that.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on his trousers. So, welcome to the part of the show where we take unhelpful advice from our listeners and feed it to our grumpy old pal,
The Means Well.
This time, though, we're actually taking call-ins from our listeners.
We're going old school radio.
We're going back to the old school on this one.
It's time for a phone-in.
Exactly. We're going back to the old school and we're accepting callers in. We've actually got a caller waiting on the line for us already, so let's not keep them waiting any longer. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. You're talking to Sadie P.
Hello.
Who have we got on the line?
It's Helen.
Hi, Helen. Thanks so much for calling in, Helen. So where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Cambridgeshire.
Oh, welcome. Helen from Cambridgeshire. So, without further ado, what is the piece of unhelpful advice that you've received from somebody about your mental health that wasn't very helpful for you and that you'd like to feed down into the Means Well today?
I would like to choose the piece of advice when people say, just be yourself.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about that?
It sounds like a great piece of advice if you know what that actually means, but more often than not, it's really not very helpful. It just means it's usually when you're struggling to figure out what it is that's going to help and you know, to sort of find the answers to sort of like, you know, those truths. So, you know, saying be yourself is, very counterproductive.
Thanks so much, Helen. If I can just get you to stay on the line for us, we'll come back to you a bit later.
Oh, okay.
And right now, we are going to feed
The Means Well.
Okay, Catty G. So, you know what to do.
We will now feed the well.
You've got to shout it in. Do you want to do the honours or shall I?
Oh yeah, we've got to shout it in. You can do the honours.
Okay, I'll do the honours. Thanks so much, Helen. Here we go. Okay. Just be yourself.
Down you go.
Okay, so I had the Means Well has received it, and now I'm going to bring up the bucket
Ooh,
now.
Here it comes.
So
Oh, I can see it.
There it is. Oh, it's coming up. Yeah, I could grab it. Yeah. Oh,
Give it a shake.
so wet. Oh, I'll shake that off. So what the Means Well is saying is, it's kind of explaining it in a more of a roundabout way here, rather than the Means Well couldn't think of like a specific phrase that would have been better, but he kind of explains it like this: the person doesn't really know who they are and what their identity is, and they're not feeling very confident. So just being themselves isn't really an option because they don't really know who that is. And what they would have found more helpful instead is kind of some question that was a bit more specific, to try and kind of get to the root of what this person likes or what they want to do. Because the person found this statement or piece of advice really overwhelming because it was just beyond the level that they were starting from.
Yeah, right. When you're not really sure of yourself or of who you are, then being told to just be yourself isn't a very clear instruction. It's like, well, but who the hell even am I? Can send you into like existential crisis.
Yeah, and it can make you feel a bit kind of like more inadequate than you already do, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's like an expectation that you should know who that is.
And
And if you don't, then there might be a tendency to kind of like to even cover that up
yeah.
and prolong the problem, I guess. So thank you, Means Well. That was it's not always as simple as just saying a different phrase, I guess. So thank you, Well.
Thank you, Well. Thank you, Helen.
Should we go back to our caller?
You still there, Helen?
Helen, are you there? Are you still on the line?
Yes,
Hey, so did you hear all of that?
I did. Yes, thank you very much.
And what did you think about what the Means Well had to say about your piece of unhelpful advice today?
Yes, much better. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Helen. Take care, and thanks for calling in. Glad to be of service with the Means Well World. This brings us on to the interview segment of the show. And today we have Catty G.
Hi,
Hey,
Sophie.
Catty. Catty is my co-host for the show, my friend, and is also an embodied movement practitioner, a visual anthropologist, and is a DJ in the making. So to kick us off with, can you tell us a little bit more about your mental health journey?
Yeah, sure. I thought a little bit about where to start with this question, and it's a difficult one because I don't want to start where I'm going to start because I want to tell a story of victimhood, but because it was the single most important event in my young life in terms of influencing my mental health and shaping my attitude to art and creativity, which is what the podcast is all about. And that is that I was bullied by my form tutor and my art tutor at school from the ages of 12 to 15 every day. And I had to see her 3 times a day. And her particular sort of form of bullying was getting me up in front of people and ridiculing either me or things that I had drawn or made in art class. So obviously I dropped art at the earliest possible chance at the beginning of GCSE, so I was 14, I guess, and completely stopped creating anything until I was in my mid-20s, I suppose. And that was definitely a trigger moment in terms of mental health, and for me to start to struggle with day-to-day not feeling good and getting stuck in the blues and that kind of thing. It did make me very scared of judgment and criticism, and putting myself and my work out there is still a huge project that I'm working on. And this podcast is part of that project.
Definitely.
But I definitely see now every time I'm creative as like a small personal victory, because she could have easily shut me down forever in that sort of area of my life, and she didn't. And so that's a sort of
well done. I want to give you a big high five through the screen. And I also want to find her and punch her.
Yeah. I don't hold her any ill will anymore. Hurt people generally, so she must have obviously gone through something, but it took me quite a lot of work to get to the stage where I could feel empathic or compassionate towards her.
That sounds really massive.
And now I thank her, because I wouldn't be who I am without all of that experience. But it did certainly trigger depression for me. And then during university, I experienced some trauma that I don't really want to go into, but I'm still sort of processing. And shortly after uni, I was diagnosed with depression. At the time, the diagnosis was a bit of a relief, I suppose, because it explained things and gave me a label. But as time went on, it was a bit of an anticlimax, because ongoing mental health support wasn't there from the NHS, I guess because I moved around quite a lot in my 20s, and in order to access NHS services, you generally have to stay in one place and have a fixed address and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, that can make it quite difficult.
Yeah, I would say that in my 20s, that was when I sort of got into the meat of my mental health crises. I would say I had sort of 2 big breakdowns, and they were both when I was trying to work in an office job in London, not doing things that were sort of very fulfilling, feeling very disconnected from things that gave my life meaning, or also from nature as well. I grew up in the countryside, and I struggled in London for the quantity of people and all of the concrete spaces and the rest of it. You know how London is. It's intense. Not for everyone.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I would say that living in London and working in an office job is an environment that forces you to become disembodied. You have to not feel what's going on in your body in order to be able to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day and cram yourself into a tube. If you were completely present and fully aware of everything that was happening in your body while you were doing those things, it would be screaming out like, I want to move, I want to not be here. So you have to shut it down.
So it's like a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Is that like a disembodied
coping with a really less than ideal situation? Is that like a dissociation? Being
Absolutely.
separate
It can
from
be
yourself?
a way of dealing with trauma as well. It's like complete, as you say, dissociation and complete disembodiment. And sometimes I think people with PTSD, they can have these episodes where they sort of can't feel their body.
I imagine if there are lots of people who kind of live their life like that and aren't really fully aware that that is what they're doing.
Certainly, I would say that sort of all of the generation of like old male CEOs, not to put them all in a bag, but the generation of my dad, I don't think he ever really had any concept of what it meant to be present in his body at all. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening. But it's just for him and for me as well. My body became the brain taxi that we talked about before. It was just all my body was good for was getting my brain around.
I love that term, a brain taxi.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop that into conversation when I get the opportunity.
You hear it a lot on sort of yoga teacher trainings and stuff. People talk about the body as brain taxi, and it's so true, and then it was good for getting my brain to the office, and then good for getting my brain to the pub to get drunk at the weekend, and that was about it.
I was wondering if maybe we could just like get people's arms and stick them onto the brain, and then just put them in the office seat, and then the rest of you can go off and do something fun.
You can go and have full body experiences without your brain messing it up and worrying about things.
I might be going off on a tangent though.
It's okay.
So was there a turning point for you? What was the moment when you realised that you were living in this way and something needed to change, and what happened?
The turning point, as I think it probably is for so many people, was my lowest point, because you reach a point where you literally you don't want to go on anymore, or you cannot go on anymore. That for me was a real wake-up call that something needed to change quite urgently. I potentially have some quite avoidant tendencies, so I quit my job and left London, moved to Barcelona.
Wow.
And it was, I love Barcelona. It's the longest place I ever stayed voluntarily. I was there 5 years. And it was a real, I guess, it was a real antidote to Englishness and the sort of slightly repressed sort of environment I found myself. And in terms of reconnecting to creativity, it was a really perfect place for that, because it's such a creative place, and all these it has this sort of fabulous artistic and architectural heritage, and
it's a great city.
And I did my master's there in visual anthropology and started making documentary films, and that was the sort of first step in starting to get back in touch with my creativity. And just like getting behind a camera and starting to go through those motions was really good for me. And then I started writing for a newspaper, which unblocked me in terms of writing. And again, I was writing about anthropology stuff, but still it was just good for me to get into the flow of and the habit of sitting down and writing about things.
Your MA sounds amazing, visual anthropology, and the writing, and can you tell us a little bit more about how that linked in with your mental health recovery at that time?
The masters.
Yeah, and the creativity that you were doing at that time.
Well, around the time I did my master's, I also moved into like an artist community with 15 other people. So I went from being in lots of ways quite like isolated in my creativity to suddenly having all of these wonderful people on my master's that supported me in making films, and all of these wonderful people in my house that I was living with that were all artists of different disciplines. And that was the first time in my life that I'd ever felt that creativity could be something really communal and collaborative and magical and healing, and it was a really, really important time.
That sounds really fun.
There were plenty of parties, but there was also sort of regular exhibitions, and I started exhibiting work for the first time, which was a big step for me, because that's a really scary area. Even though it was, just in the gallery in the house, we had sort of hundreds of people come and check out what we were doing.
And it was good because I was able to be quite playful with what I was doing. I didn't pigeonhole myself as one kind of artist. I could try different things for each exhibition and see what worked. And yeah, it was a good time.
And I can just imagine how inside you must have been just jumping for joy that this art teacher always following you in the back of your mind, telling you that you're crap, your artwork is crap or whatever. I can just imagine that kind of inner victory of having an exhibition and lots of people coming along and being interested in your work.
And it was a huge moment,
Got absolutely no time for bullies whatsoever.
No, and I think also when you're bullied by an authority figure, you perhaps internalise it on a deeper level than you would if it's just a peer or somebody else in your class bullying you. So they have a huge responsibility, those teachers and caregivers.
Especially as a child as well, when you're kind of taught that, you know, there's certain people in authority who you should be able to trust. It kind of messes with your whole idea of who you can and can't trust. It's really awful. Such an abuse of power.
Yeah, it really was.
Well, so thanks for sharing all of that. So you're obviously in the UK right now. So what made you leave Barcelona and come back here, and what's the story there?
The reason I left Barcelona, apart from the sort of ongoing financial crisis, which was making earning money really difficult there, I was afraid of sort of getting stuck in Barcelona forever and never, you know, growing up and getting a quote-unquote real life. So I decided I better go back to London and try and be a serious human. So I went back to London and got a job for a documentary film festival, which was actually, the job was brilliant and I loved that part, but still I was in London and still I was completely disembodied. I hadn't discovered yoga and I got to a really low point with my mental health there, and somehow in the middle of that I found Yoga with Adrienne and started doing those sort of short little everyday practices with her.
I love yoga with Adrienne.
She's amazing. I have so much respect for what she's doing. We're sort of making yoga a more accessible thing in terms of not needing money and not needing to be into necessarily all the spiritual component of it.
So you found yoga. Was that the start of your embodiment practice?
Yeah, that was when, again, I quit everything, and cliche of cliches, I went and did a yoga teacher training. And I did that yoga teacher training not because I really wanted to be a yoga teacher, but because I was clinging for dear life to something that made me feel better, I suppose. And it made me feel better without feeling like it was somehow toxic, like going out and getting drunk with your friends or whatever. So it felt sort of fundamentally and authentically good for me. And so I just followed it. Yeah, that was a huge turning point for my mental health, because it was the first time that I was able in my life to sort of stop running, I suppose. I'd always been, even in terms of sitting alone with myself, and I remember once I had to go on a bus ride from London to Bristol, which is only a couple of hours. But I was just that time of not being distracted by something was so terrifying. I arrived in Bristol and I was sort of cold sweats and tears and like, oh my God, and that was just a couple of hours of sitting alone with myself on a bus. You know, it was so impossible to me.
Wow.
And I don't practice a very fancy kind of yoga. It's not the sort of super athletic ballerina, fancy poses, any of that kind of thing. It's not, that's not particularly the part of yoga that I'm interested in at all.
Yeah, it's the way that you've described your embodiment practice to me is like partly meditation and partly dance and partly kind of like a 5 rhythms kind of dance and connecting with your body. Can you tell us a little bit more about embodied movement practice?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, when I was very disembodied, I really needed the structure of yoga to sort of get me moving and to have shapes to aim for and to, you know, just unlock that thing of getting back into my body again. But then after a while, maybe a few years of practicing most days, that structure started to feel a little bit restrictive and dogmatic, I suppose.
And I did some embodied and somatic trainings around that time. So that involves sort of anything in which you're using proprioception, which is sensing where your body is in space and time, and interoception, which is sensing what's going on within your body. And there's all sorts of practices that fall under like that somatic or embodied practices umbrella, I suppose, like Tai Chi or Feldenkrais or Alexander Technique, or yoga is one, or contact improvisation is one. You know, there's so many that I would say that they're all just signposts to the same thing, and that's the body as, I suppose, a vehicle for awakening, or the body as an instrument through which to listen to the world.
So it seems like it's kind of really tapping into like a different part of yourself that has been kind of buried or not been aware of, and it's like the way that you described it before that kind of stuck out for me was like a connecting with your body and trusting it to tell you what you need to do, rather than thinking from your brain, like having this wisdom coming from your body. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And that's what somatic dance is. It's dancing. It's a dance that's much more about your internal experience than about the visual experience of an audience. It doesn't matter what the audience is seeing. It matters 100% what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So they're very different. Like, I think that, learning to dance and learning dance moves and routines, that's really good, and it's proven to be really good for your brain and your mental health and everything else. But then there's a whole different bunch of benefits that get unlocked when you start to dance or move your body in response to your own experience and your internal stimulus, I suppose, or external stimulus like music. Yeah.
So do you practice this every day, and what does it look like in practice?
Yeah, I try to practice every day, and I would say that definitely benefits for me have been unlocked by, even if it's just 5 minutes every day, that's better for me than an hour every week. I think that continual discipline of just showing up for yourself and checking in with yourself every single day can be really powerful and really transformative. So my practice just looks like rolling out my mat and putting on some music and closing my eyes, and then just seeing what arises and seeing what's up that day. And some days it will be all I have the energy for is like a child's pose and crying on the floor. And other days I'll have like energy for some kind of energetic, I don't know, Afro drumming, booty shaking, or like booty yoga. Have you tried that? That's really intense.
No, I haven't. Booty yoga.
Yeah, booty with the B-U-T-I, not like booty. But it sort of has quite a lot of twerking and, African drums and dirty bass lines.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
It's really fun. But people up for debate as to whether it's actually yoga. But yeah, super, super fun. So it's a very I like to think of it as like a prescriptive practice that, depending on the day, sometimes I will be low energy, so I'll need to meet myself where I'm at on a certain day and then bring myself up to a sort of slightly higher energy state. Or some days I'll be all up in my head and with lots of scattered energy, and so then those days what I need is a much like slower, more grounded practice and to bring myself down. So
that sounds absolutely amazing, really inspiring. And I'm thinking about your DJing as well, because I can kind of see the links with the dancing, the embodiment, and the music, and then is that what inspired you to get into DJing?
Yeah, well, I think yoga led into dance. I would never have been able to get into dance without yoga, because I needed to sort of get back into my body first, and then through. And I call it dance, but it's, if anyone were to see me, it's not like I've got impressive moves or I'm very graceful or anything, but I love it. So yoga opened the doorway to dance, and then I sort of realised as I was starting to move my body to music that music had this incredible power to completely shift my state entirely. And that it could make me feel sad, it could make me feel relaxed, it could make me feel energetic, it could make me feel
deeply sort of introspective, or, you know, like I wanted to go out and socialize. It was like a sort of, I realized that, you know, that it has this really amazing power to shift state. So I was sort of very much playing around with moving my body to different kinds of music and starting to explore like energetic journeys of music and different soundscapes of music. Yeah.
So DJing is like a responsibility, really, then, because you're providing for other people a journey, and you can kind of take them in all these different directions. So
yeah, I would say any form of holding space for other people is a responsibility, which is why it is also, you know, can be abused, and you get people who, you know, gurus in yoga, and there's been like quite a lot of scandal in the yoga world in the last couple of years because, you know, people abuse their responsibility that comes with the power that comes with holding space for people and taking people on energetic journeys where they deal with deep things. Because I'm not particularly interested in becoming like a club DJ, although I do love playing for sort of, you know, dancing. But I'm more interested in playing for ecstatic dance and yoga and sound baths and things like that.
Yeah, so, for healing purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's the kind of event that I would go to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about DJ Toilet Seat and who that is?
No, DJ's Toilet Seat, my old friend. She is my DJ alias from my time at university, when we would all be sort of hanging out in big groups and listening to music, and I would always inevitably put on an absolute clanger of a tune, or stop the tune in the middle of it, or accidentally put on some like Eckhart Tolle self-help when everyone was in the middle of a dance, and, you know, and people would just shout, "Oh, DJ Toilet Seat, nice to have again." But she's the DJ alias I use now on our Friday night dance parties.
I love DJ Toilet Seat.
And I like her because I feel like she sort of gives me permission to fail and be imperfect. And, you know, I'm DJing for the love of it, not because I'm, you know, planning on being some perfect club DJ. That's not the idea.
I wonder if we start to take ourselves too seriously, it sort of will start to not become fun anymore.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely.
I just thought of another question. It's not on the list. I'm going renegade.
Go for it.
Do you feel like your experiences with depression affect the way that you interact with your creative practices, as opposed to somebody who perhaps hasn't had any experience with depression?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that certainly when it comes to writing, that for me is like a vital support system, as is moving my body regularly. But there have been times when I've been sort of in some kind of mental health crisis, and I literally couldn't get to a place where I could sit down and get my notebook out fast enough, because it was like I needed it out onto a page. It needed to not be in my head. It needed to become more manageable and outside of me. And so I have times when writing is a very urgent necessity for me, I suppose. And maybe people who don't have depression have that, you know, maybe they also have an urgent necessity to write also, but maybe not in the same way in terms of, you know, needing to do it in order to be okay from moment to moment, you know.
So I'm wondering if there is something you wish that people knew about your condition that would make it easier for you.
Well, I think it's just so unbelievably common that if we could reduce the stigma, which I suppose is what this podcast is trying to do, but if we could reduce the stigma, that would make the experience of feeling depressed immediately half as bad, you know, it would immediately make it better. Because the shame that we carry around for feeling bad is almost as bad as the feeling bad often, or at least they completely exacerbate one another.
Yeah, I totally agree. And perhaps, keeps us stuck. Adds another layer of something else to deal with.
Yeah, and British people with their stiff upper lip when people ask how they are. People, you know, we're not societally conditioned to honestly tell them how we are, and that is something that I sort of wish that we could change. But the other thing that I would really wish that society at large understood is that like depression isn't necessarily a weakness, and that feeling things deeply isn't necessarily a weakness. And actually it takes great strength to go through the real depths of feeling really bad. It's easier in many ways to distract yourself and repress difficult feelings, but I think a lot of beautiful things can come out of depression, and that it's not a weakness, it's a strength to be able to survive it.
Yeah, I'd agree. Thanks for that. That's a really good piece of advice. And lastly, I want to ask you if you have a recommendation for our listeners of a book or a podcast or a program or something that's really benefited you in your mental health recovery.
Yes, I have a really good one for this. And that is a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's a book that is really good for anybody, but particularly for people that want to reconnect with their creativity. And it has a practice in it called the morning pages, which maybe you've heard about.
Yeah, I have heard about that, yeah.
Shall I explain it quickly? Or
Yeah, some people might not have heard of it.
Yeah, it's just a practice that she recommends, where basically you're supposed to, for about 3 months, you're supposed to wake up and first thing every morning, just basically brain dump stream of consciousness onto a page, 3 pages of writing. And then you're supposed to never look at it again. You can burn it or, file it away for never to be looked again. But, the whole point is you're writing for nobody. You're just writing to write. And it sounds simple and potentially boring, but actually, if you stick with it, it has all of these amazing knock-on effects in terms of it's actually amazing therapy, because you can't lie to yourself. If you're writing something down and it's not true, you're like, why am I writing something that nobody else is ever going to see, but it's a lie? You can become very aware of the lies that you tell yourself. You can become very aware of how you censor yourself, so you can start to get around that inner censor, because nobody's ever going to read it, so it doesn't matter. So it's a really deep practice. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll put some links to that on the Facebook page as well then.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you so much, Catty G. It's been a real pleasure.
No, thank you, Sadie P. For me too, thank you.
Just need to let you know that we made a bit of a boo-boo in the previous episode. The In the Mind series actually happened in 2016. We have put a link to the revisiting of Stephen Fry's Secret Life of the Manic Depressive, which is called The Not So Secret Life of the Manic Depressive, 10 years on our Facebook page. Apologies about that. Thank you for listening to episode 2 of the Mad About podcast. This week we talked about dance, we got to know my co-host Catty G, and we had a caller in on the Means Well.
We'll be sharing links to everything we talked about to our Facebook page. Just search Mad About Podcast.
In our next episode, we are totally literally